right, so it looks like Tulsi Gabbard appeared on the Jimmy Dore show once again. This is second or third time, maybe third I want to say, but it could be the second, I'm not really sure to be honest. But it had been a while since Jimmy Dore had brought on Tulsi Gabbard onto his show. And in this video, they explain her BDS vote, that's Boycott, Divest, Sanction movement. Essentially, in order to put pressure on Israel to come to the table and to actually, negotiate a peace deal. The idea is, boycott them, divest your assets, and to sanction them. And so it's a sort of, peaceful way of protesting, essentially. And she voted no against that. And now she's going to give her answer. Now, I'm going to have a nuanced take on this in an explanation. But a lot of the responses to this video, which we will look at later on after we get through this video, were not so good. They were actually pretty critical of Jimmy Dore, which is somewhat rare. Although, to be quite honest, it's not all that rare. Sometimes I will see Jimmy Dore videos with some heavy dislikes, and that's what happened in this case. So let's go ahead and play this video, and then I will talk about it.
Raucous out of your vote, they said was anti-BDS, right? Tell us why you voted for that, because there's a reason. And then you also voted for Rashid Tlaib's also bill that kind of spoke to that too. So can you talk about that?
Yes, there were a few bills that came before Congress, either for co-sponsorship or actually came to the floor for a vote. I took a vote on a bill that spoke to finding a peaceful solution to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Part of that bill said, I don't have the exact language, but it did condemn the BDS movement, which I didn't necessarily agree with the language, but I voted on it because I don't think that this BDS movement is the only or perhaps even the best way to achieve that peaceful outcome of stability and security for both the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. I think that's got to be our focus and objective. Right alongside that, I co-sponsored a bill I think was originally introduced by Ilhan Omar and Congressman John Lewis that spoke to the protection of freedom of speech in our own country, which I wholeheartedly stand up for to protect and defend, especially as a service member, willing to give my life to do so. So while I personally disagree with the tactics of the BDS movement to achieve that objective, I absolutely and wholeheartedly support the rights for those who choose to be involved with that or who are choosing that as their method of protest to be able to continue to do so without fear of repercussions either from state government or our federal government.
So the natural question then is if you don't support the BDS, which is a nonviolent way to protest the occupation, and what nonviolent protest? Because when they nonviolently protest, they shoot them. So this would be another. So what would be a way that they could protest nonviolently if you don't support BDS?
Well, this is a movement. I think that especially this legislation is specifically talking about people here in the United States as a way for them to lodge their positions and protesting positions within our own government, which I support their right to do so. As we look to the negotiations ultimately that need to take place between the Palestinian leadership and the Israeli leadership, I think that negotiation process is ultimately what's going to be required to find a lasting, peaceful resolution.
Right. But don't you think, so I think that, the way it worked, I'm older than you, so I remember the apartheid state in South Africa and how they used divestment, and that was actually a good pressure point. So I think you got to, whatever is nonviolent, I'm okay for. But you support a two-state solution, right?
I do.
Okay. All right. Tulsi Gabbard, thanks for coming in on Veterans Day. Now you're off to.
And that's where it ends. So they talk about it for about 3 minutes. Now, there are a couple of things to go over here. First, I will tell you guys that the like to dislike bar is 2.7K to 1.4K. And if you go into, the comments section, it's basically filled with people who are just disappointed with Jimmy Dore. It says, you got to have more balls than that, Jimmy. We know you like her, but you clearly went soft on her. Jimmy can't believe you didn't confront her on this and push harder on it and let her sneak off on it. This one says, Tulsi, you're missing the mark. Jimmy, the least you could have said is, I disagree with you, Tulsi. She is smart enough to understand that she's insulting people's intelligence. Not a good look, Tulsi. And then, there's just there's a bunch of comments here that are not, not a good answer. She could admit she was wrong. Jimmy, I love you, but that was some weak sauce, and you know it. Another clip where Jimmy gets rolled. That was the weakest pushback from Jimmy Dore I've ever seen. Pathetic. Disappointed that Jimmy didn't press her more on this. He should have asked if she's ever had to sign or make an oath to Israel. Damn, Tulsi. And so there's just, there's a bunch of comments like this saying that, oops, sorry to see my two heroes fail in the same vid. So a lot of people who view Jimmy Dore as a hero, disappointed by what they're seeing in this video. Now, there's obviously, as you can see by the title, just a bunch of people who are not happy with this video. Now, when it comes to the issue, right, when it comes to BDS, okay, now the obvious thing is that really the only way to really get Israel to do anything is you're going to have to withdraw aid. The United States is going to have to take back its aid. It's going to have to cancel giving aid. And it's also going to have to sanction Israel. And so, you freeze assets, you stop trade, you stop imports and trades and stuff like that. And you pressure them to a point where they are forced to come to the table. Because what they're doing right now is they're not in that way. Not only are they not in that situation, we're giving them more incentive to keep doing what they're doing because we're giving them aid. We give them $3 billion a year. And then, we'd give them loan guarantees and then forgive those loan guarantees. I mean, Israel has been very dependent upon the United States for a long time now, especially when it comes to trade and stuff like that and a lot of things. And the thing is that Israel actually creates a lot of stuff, especially in the medicinal field, in that sort of field, the pharmaceutical field, whatever you want to call it, that sort of area. Like new cancer treatments and immunotherapy, and they have universal healthcare. Okay, they have a universal healthcare system. Something that we don't have. I don't know why nobody talks about the fact that they have a universal healthcare system, basically where it's like, everybody has to have insurance, but then you can pay for extra private insurance to get luxurious healthcare and stuff. So they have that, but somehow we can't have it. That country, that we're supporting and that everyone champions on the right, they have universal healthcare. We can't have it for some reason. Gee, really interesting, huh? I don't know why nobody talks about it. And they have a ton of innovation when it comes to cancer treatments and stuff like that and different things in that medicinal field. So, again, more evidence against this universal healthcare system not bringing innovation. You know what I'm saying? So, the fact that nobody talks about that is pretty concerning. Very concerning, actually. But when it comes to the BDS issue, okay, obviously supporting BDS is the right thing to do, and that's what you should support. Now, there are a couple of caveats I have to throw in there. Now, this is actually a tweet from Bernie back on January 28th. He says, while I do not support the BDS movement, we must defend every American's constitutional right to peacefully engage in political activity. It is clear to me that S.1 would violate Americans' First Amendment rights. So as you can see here, Bernie himself, who is by far the most pro-Palestinian candidate in the race, says he does not support the BDS movement. Now, I'm okay with Bernie saying that he doesn't support the BDS movement, and the reason for that is because it's simply not a position you can hold and be the candidate to win. It's just not. The issue is simply not palatable enough, and that's the unfortunate truth. And it's going to take a long time, The fight to break down the barrier of, being able to critique Israel without being called an AS. I don't know how long it's going to take for that fight to be won. It's certainly taking longer than I thought it would. But, man, it does seem to be taking a while, doesn't it? But, so Bernie doesn't support it. I understand why he doesn't. So I don't have, I'm not, really all that mad at Tulsi Gabbard for, not supporting it just because it's not a palatable position as a public official. Now, with that being said, obviously what Tulsi's saying here, she gives a really non-answer. Jimmy's like, well, what can you really do if it's not BDS, if it's not any of the other stuff? Well, then what are you supposed to do? You know what I'm saying? Well, what can we do? She doesn't even really come off as very critiqueful of Israel. Critiqueful. Critical of Israel, okay? So, it's just she doesn't come off very, pro-Palestinian to me is what it comes off as. Now, she was back when the Iran deal was first going on, and Bibi was basically, he came in without the president's, notice, and went and spoke to Congress and tried to throw a wrench in the Iran deal proceedings. She went to that meeting as Bernie and Warren and a bunch of Democrats, boycotted that meeting. A bunch of Democrats boycotted that meeting. She went to that one, so keep that in mind. She doesn't seem very good on the issue. Now, what you got to understand, again, is you can't really be that critical of her for the BDS stuff just because it's not very, palatable. But then you could also say that Bernie's a more mainstream candidate. Tulsi Gabbard is anything but mainstream. She's a very niche sort of candidate in that she has a really, small sort of support base and a very specific support base and voter base, which is of people who mainly value foreign policy. And so for her to be like this foreign policy person but not support BDS, it's kind of weak, especially when I can see why Bernie wouldn't say it, and I'm okay with it because he actually has a chance to be president of the United States. Tulsi has no chance whatsoever. But, for her, it's kind of like, okay, and she's not even running for Congress again. So, I don't know. I'm a little bit sort of all around the place on this one because for Bernie, I can understand him not being able to say that he's pro-BDS even if he is. But, when it comes to Tulsi, if you're going to be that niche candidate, you probably want to go all the way. She took a while to talk about the Bolivia coup as well, whereas Bernie did on the first day and all this stuff. So, I don't know. I'm a little bit sort of all over the place. All in all, I would say that she doesn't seem to be very pro-Palestine, and I would also say that she, you can't really fault her all that much for being anti-BDS. But, obviously being pro-BDS is the right move, but when you're a public official, there's just certain things that are impossible to support, at least publicly anyway, and be able to do that. And unfortunately, being pro-BDS is one of those things. So that's something we've got to sort of break the barrier for. But until then, this is kind of going to be the answer you get from candidates,